A 14-4-2 record on games played on New Year's Eve this century? Hey, when you're making a push for the playoffs, we'll take any evidence to help you believe.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome. I am Ryan G. This is Locked On Flames, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. New Year's Eve magic for your Calgary Flames. Will preview the game against the Flyers coming up at Scotiabank Saddledome. Devin Cooley signs an extension. So what's to like about the Flames goalie department as a whole? And then we'll take a look at some old people stuff concerning Mikael Backlund and Blake Coleman and some of the superior play they've been delivering, and a quick look at World Juniors. I am a lifelong play-by-play broadcaster and a fan of the Calgary Flames for a few decades, since Peter Marr, the longtime radio voice for the Flames, brought me into the fold during the 2004 Stanley Cup playoff run. I mentioned the New Year's Eve success. It's a silly stat. I always have a conversation with a friend of mine who jokes about the absurdity of some baseball stats when announcers will, over the course of 162 games, say so-and-so hits the curveball at a 305 average on a Tuesday wearing dark uniforms when the temperature is between 50 and 60 degrees. And all things considered, it's not really useful stat to know that Calgary is 14-4-2 in games played on New Year's Eve since the 2000-01 season. So basically the start of the century. It's the most wins, 14, of any NHL club over that span. So it's a super silly stat, but going into the game on Wednesday against the Flyers, why not bring it up? Because it is actually New Year's Eve. So happy New Year's Eve to you all as well. One of those games actually ended up being against the Flyers. Calgary hosted Philadelphia back in 2023 for Blake Coleman's 500th NHL game, and Pickles had a goal and assist during that game. And back then, Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost, who both had assists, were playing for the Flyers side of the equation. Clearly not going to be the case tonight against Philadelphia, but a 4-3 win in that matchup for Calgary. Had Nazem Kadri, Mikael Backlund both score goals in that game. And it's a critical moment for Calgary as they continue this home stretch if the Flames are going to make the postseason, because Calgary right now is sitting just 3 points behind 8th place San Jose. And it's a really jam-packed race in the Western Conference, considering there's just 7 points separating the playoffs from the bottom of the conference. It's absolutely crazy how things have kind of shaped up in the Western Conference so far this year. I'm excited to see how this game plays out when it comes to even strength 5-on-5, because when you look at high danger versus just general 5-on-5 shooting attempts, according to Natural Stat Trick, the Flyers are 24th in standard 5-on-5 opportunities, but they're 9th in the NHL when it comes to high danger opportunities. Calgary is kind of the inverse of that. So the Flames pretty steady at standard 5-on-5 shot attempts, but high danger, they go from 10th to 17th. And so this is a battle of two teams that are kind of a little bit different in the way that they approach the net in the offensive zone, going on those 5-on-5 opportunities. And it's the second meeting between Calgary and Philadelphia. The two got together back on November 2nd in Philly, a 2-1 win for the Flames. Calgary, no success on the power play, not necessarily a surprise. But one thing that stood out to me in that matchup was the fact that Philadelphia was limited to just 18 shots. You have Dustin Wolf getting 17 saves. And it's a big game for Huberdeau, too. Jonathan Huberdeau ended up having both of Calgary's goals in that matchup. I think Mackenzie Weegar ended up having an assist on one of them as well. And so it's a little bit of an oddity to see Calgary only put up 21 shots itself, let alone allow 18. Other than that, there wasn't terribly anything that stood out from that game that's worth bringing up to kind of paint a picture of what's going to happen in this game. In fact, it's also November 2nd, too, was one of the bright spots for Calgary in the stretch to start the season that was just kind of a downer and has put Calgary in this position where if they hadn't ended up going on the 9-game losing streak or whatever it ended up being overall and getting the win at Philadelphia, that kind of started steadying out Calgary's path this season. It's really kind of inconsequential, all things considered, other than the fact that it was a W and Calgary has a chance to take the season series from the Flyers. And that's something that bodes well, considering the fact that the Flames have won 11 of their last 13 against Philadelphia, going back to the 2018-19 season. One bright spot, though, for the Flyers is how good they've got production from one of their recent call-ups with Carl Grundstrom. 4th consecutive game on Tuesday night with a goal, 7th goal of the season through 12 games. This is the 2nd call-up stint for Grundstrom, and he has more goals than any other teammate over an 11-game span. What's even more impressive, too, is considering how good Carl has been since December 9th, when he has the 7th most goals in the NHL. You're looking at 3 fewer than Connor McDavid, 1 fewer than Nathan McKinnon, and Grundstrom also owns the NHL's longest active goal streak. So all things considered, there's some hot hands right now for the Philadelphia Flyers. Philly's actually in pretty good position, 20, 11, and 7 right now, 3rd in the Metropolitan Division under new head coach Rick Tocchet, who, with the win against Vancouver in the prior game going into this matchup with Calgary, ended up taking the season series from his former team with the Canucks. It's a pretty good start for Philadelphia. They're trying to make the Stanley Cup playoffs for the first time since 2020. And one area in which Philadelphia has really shined this year is how good they've been scoring late. Because if you're any semblance of a Flames follower over the course of recent seasons, especially the prior two, how good Calgary has been scoring goals late. That's something that Philadelphia has been able to do. In fact, they fell behind Vancouver in the game prior to this one, and they end up outscoring Vancouver the rest of the way 6-2 for a league-leading 14th comeback victory. And so you kind of have something possibly giving in this matchup because Calgary's been red hot at the Saddledome. We highlight how good Calgary's record has been at home in December, going 7-1-0. And part of the reason for that is the goal differential in the third period, too. Calgary's outscored their opponents 14-3 in the final period at home, which is the best of any team on home ice this month. So not terribly surprised that you're going to have two teams with strengths in the third period going up against one another at the Saddledome. One other quick note about Philadelphia, first and foremost, you have Dan Vladar back in the Saddledome. He's not likely to start, according to our friends over on Locked On Flyers, but 14-6-3 this season against or in his starts. So he's been stellar for Philadelphia. Part of the reason that they've got out to a 20-win start, 14 of those 20 wins with Vladar and net, and then recent Western Conference acquisition for Philadelphia coming over from Anaheim. Trevor Zegras leads the club, 39 points, has 15 goals to lead the team as well. And I want to share with you a little conversation that Rachel and Russ over at Locked On Flyers discussed about how the Flyers are playing now and that they don't go really into any hefty losing streaks.
Coming off the loss to Seattle, I think that's one of the things we appreciate about this team so much is that they just haven't had losing streaks this year. You know, no, they always seem to bounce back and win, right?
Yeah. They're 11-1-5, but the 5 are, overtime losses where they've gotten a point. But yeah, it's still a pretty good thing because, they get something out of it. I don't think Sam Ersson would have won this game, though. I don't.
No, I don't either.
I think they would have lost the game if Sam Ersson was in there. And I think, honestly, Dan Vladar was the difference in the game because Vancouver had so many high-grade chances. They may not have had a ton of shots, but they had enough where it was dangerous for most of the game.
Russ and Rachel pointing out specifically how valuable Vladar was in that game against the Canucks. So goaltending is certainly on our minds. When we come back on this edition of Locked On Flames, we'll talk about a recent extension. Devin Cooley is going to be in the Sea of Red for the foreseeable future. We do that next when this episode of Locked On Flames continues. Thank you so much for being here for this edition of Locked On Flames. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with the NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. So, for example, Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become basically appointment viewing for NBA Happy Hour. What you do is you open up the FanDuel app during Happy Hour, and it brings you something new. Maybe there's boosts, bonuses, some surprises. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. The timing is perfect, too. Right before the games, right before the weekend starts, it adds a little extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour, only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thank you for making Locked On Flames your first listen every day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, please go check out the Everydayer Club. What is holding you back? Get access to ad-free audio for Locked On Flames. It's compatible with your favorite major podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. And there's an invite too in there for a members only Discord channel. So you can get in there, start looking through the Discord server that includes the Flames channel, and just start having some fun. Just combining your enjoyment for Locked On Flames, the Locked On Podcast Network, with others who find value in it too. And hopefully you'll see me in there in the first part of 2026. I'm excited to see what the future holds for Locked On Flames and how I can start engaging with you more. Go to lockedonflames.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. Devin Cooley is going to be part of the Flames goalie department for the foreseeable future, a new contract that kicks off in the 2026-27 season. So really excited to see Devin Cooley on this new 2-year one-way contract. It's going to have an AAV of $1.35 million. And it's nice when you get great production out of your second netminder. We talked about Dan Vladar in our first segment, and now how good he's been as one of the primary, as the primary guy in Philadelphia. Well, Cooley's at .914 for a save percentage. He's ahead of Dustin Wolf in goals against average and has a 4-4-2 record. I think if you're going to start nitpicking Devin Cooley's performance this year, that's certainly where you'd like to see things be a little bit different, having a touch better mark in the loss column at 4-4-2. But that said, it's an exciting time for Devin Cooley, who's always kind of found himself to be a little bit of an underdog, and he spoke about that with NHL Flames on X.
2 years ago, I was getting scratched in the American League. 4 years ago, I was backing up in the East Coast League. 5 years ago, I was, a walk-on in college, or however many years ago now, I was a walk-on third string in college where I wasn't even traveling with the team on road trips, and in juniors, I finished in last place in the USHL stats-wise. And that has been the story of my entire career, is that I've always been a little bit of a late bloomer And I've always really believed in my ability and my talent, even if not everybody else did, you know, which I don't blame them at all, because I've had some really rough years, you know, and it just shows that, like, no matter what comes my way, like, I'm just going to continue to just focus on myself and believe in myself and continue to work as hard as I possibly can and continue to grow. And I think my career is just, it really speaks to that.
Devin discussing the idea of believing in yourself, and that's somewhat of an overused trope in sports, is no one believed in us, no one thought we could do this, but we believed in ourselves. But I think Devin did a good job kind of road mapping his experience and all of the reasons why he should feel that way, and how exciting it is now for the Flames to have a goalie department that features Cooley and Dustin Wolf. Dustin is arguably one of the best goaltenders in the entire Western Conference, the entire NHL, and those two now have, I guess, no doubt about it, been the reason that Calgary is closer to a playoff team in so many ways than they are going into the bottom of the conference standings, because a lot of these games that Calgary has been able to win as they've gotten hot, with that hotness approaching 20 games at this point, as opposed to where it's been 10 or 15, especially the month of December, and especially as good as Calgary has been at home. They're second best in goals against average in the entire NHL, and same for save percentage on home ice. So both of those stats on home ice, I think that's a key, is Calgary is playing so good at home as opposed to on the road. And so Craig Conroy, the general manager, keeping Cooley in the fold is going to be huge for the Flames. 28 years old, signed as a free agent with Calgary back in the summer of 2024, and was with the Wranglers back during that season. Had 21 wins, was an all-star in that 2024 season. So there's a lot of up and to the right when you look at the trending chart for Devin Cooley, and it makes you kind of wonder why Devin Cooley maybe didn't test his value outside of the Flames organization. And Devin addressed that as well, talking to NHL Flames on Twitter as well.
It's a great deal for me to continue to grow and develop and, you know, play behind one of the best goalies in the world and learn from him and get that NHL experience under my belt, like, and just continue to prove that I can be a really, really good goalie in this league. And my biggest concern was, like, my age, you know, is I'm a lot older, and, you know, the year's going really well so far. Is there going to be better opportunity elsewhere? And the consensus was I need to get that experience first, and I need to play like 100 or so games and continue to prove to the rest of the league that I can be a really good goalie.
I kind of hear a man with a plan right there. It sounds like Devin Cooley is pretty self-aware, has a good feel for where he should go. I think that seems to be informed from some of his past experiences, as he mentioned, being a walk-on and being a backup and somebody who's somewhat doubted his entire career. I also think it sounds like somebody who believes in the Flames organization and kind of wants to be part of what's happening in Calgary, which I'm wearing a Denver Broncos hoodie today just because I've been a Broncos fan for my whole life. You all who've listened to Locked On Flames with me over the course of my 3 weeks in the hosting chair know that, because I reference the Denver Broncos all the time. This is a 14-win Broncos team this year on the heels of a playoff drought-breaking 2024 season. And the 10 years between Super Bowl 50 and last year's playoffs was the worst stretch of Broncos football in my entire life. And when you start to hear how the Broncos players talk about the culture that's built with the new ownership group in Denver, and then they brought in Sean Payton, and how all of those things have kind of worked together, no doubt also getting a quarterback who has been consistently winning for them, there's those culture building blocks that start to stand out for a squad. And when I hear how much the Flames talk about the Calgary organization in so much positive light, how excited they are for Scotia Place opening up in a couple of seasons. That's something that Devin Cooley even said he wants to be a part of. It feels like there's a lot of positive indicators, at least if nothing else, for the culture that Calgary has. Even Rasmus Anderson talking about potential trades in the after hours with Sportsnet recently, that kind of stood out as well. And so there's a solid relationship in that goalie department. Craig Conroy addressed that as well in the discussion on X. You should go listen to the rest of the Devin Cooley comments, listen to Craig Conroy talk about that on the Flames official website. Even Cooley multiple times bringing up how much his girlfriend likes Calgary, which again just seems like that's a team culture, a community culture type thing that stands out. So we'll see how this extension works. You already have the extension signed by Dustin Wolf for 7 years earlier in the year. So that's exciting that Calgary's goalie department has kind of been solidified, and we'll see what happens as they go into this matchup with the Flames, or with the Flyers, beg your pardon, against the Flames tonight, but more so into the early part of 2026 and that lengthy road trip that kind of looms on the horizon after this 5-game homestand is all but over. Why is Calgary continuing to play very good hockey? There's a reason for that. It has to do with the old guys. We talk old people stuff, plus share a quick update from World Juniors when this episode of Locked On Flames continues. Thank you so much for making Locked On Flames your first listen every single day. Let's get into some old people stuff. This is what I always talk to my kids about. Old guy advice, all the stuff that I know now that I didn't know 10 years ago and 20 years ago, and certainly didn't know when I was a kid. And that's what we're experiencing for the Flames with Mikael Backlund and Blake Coleman. You got a lot of veteran leadership on what is now, at least against the last game for Calgary against Boston, was a second line. It was a third line with Coleman and Backlund for a while during the season that didn't really feel like a true third line. 8-4-0 for Calgary at home over the course of the recent games. And you have 5 goals from Mikael Backlund helping fuel that. He leads the club in December with that tally, and overall points with Kadri at 10 so far for the month of December. Plus 10 currently this month. Blake Coleman at plus 8 is also working really well since the end of November, and it has definitely been a reason that Calgary continues to rise to the occasion of trying to get to this postseason spot that they know they can get. I mean, that's one thing to consider, is how Calgary, after those first 12 games of the season, felt like, oh, this team is out. There's nothing they're going to be able to do to make a postseason run, and that has been not the case. Ryan Huska, talking about Mikael Backlund, says, I just think since the first month of the year, he felt a lot of pressure when the team wasn't having results. I think once he got himself focused on, if I take care of my own game, everybody else is going to follow suit. And I think he got himself to reset. That's Ryan Huska, the Flames head coach, talking about Mikael Backlund. But 1,100 plus games for the Flames. And even consider the fact that, Mikael Backlund had not ever had a multi-goal game in back-to-back performances until this year. That happened in the Seattle and Vegas matchups. And that's really impressive, because it shows the captain's ability to, still find kind of uncharted paths and continue to find ways to motivate and lead a team, especially when things aren't going well, which was certainly the case for Calgary early this year. That third line, now again, as I mentioned, the second line, just has continued to perform above expectations. I think it's been part of the reason that Calgary's results have been so positive, especially playing on home ice. Even moments that haven't resulted in a score or points for Backlund have stood out. There was a moment in the Oilers game last week where they had one of their best sequences, got behind the net and ended up almost getting a score in on Connor Ingram. But it's that continued leadership that fuels this group of Calgary players that I guess doesn't necessarily need leadership fully from Mikael Backlund. I mean, you have a lot of veterans that play on those top 2 lines for Calgary. And then, of course, Rasmus Andersson having an excellent year as kind of the statesman, defenseman. But it's been impressive to see what's happened for Backlund. And then Coleman has continued to come on strong as well. I mean, that's one thing that's really stood out for the Flames, is how good Coleman has been in this season now leading the team with 12 goals, has kind of provided some offensive consistency as of late, but then continues to be a tremendous asset when it comes to the defensive ability. I mean, he was talked about in positive light from many of his teammates recently. Connor Zary is one that comes to mind about how good he can be on the defensive side. And then when you lead the team in shorthanded goals, and Calgary is one of the best shorthanded scoring teams in all of the NHL, that just shows how reliable Coleman has been as a two-way player this year. And then if you're going to look at somebody who can help them, potentially push toward the playoffs, Blake Coleman comes to mind when you've won Stanley Cups and you've had that experience at the top of the game. It'll make a huge difference typically. So I'm eager to see how well that line pairing with Coleman and Backlund, and then whether it's Coronado or Zary or whoever's playing with them, they kind of flip the script between the last two games. I'm eager to see what kind of dividends that pays for the Flames as they continue to make this push. And again, the stretch of games continues to be critical on the horizon when you look at how Calgary's trying to gain ground in the Western Conference standings. And if you get past the Flyers, who again are having a fairly solid year, third in the Metropolitan Division, then you have games against Nashville and Seattle to close out the 5-game homestand. And those are teams that you're chasing up the ladder in the Western Conference. And before you know it, you get into the first week of 2026 being completed, and Calgary might be in one of those final wild card spots, or at least right on the doorstep and nipping at the heels of Los Angeles or San Jose, or it might even be Utah. Again, who knows what's going to happen by the time the Flames get to that final game of the homestand on the 5th of January, which is Monday, which coincidentally will also be the next time we join you. I want to close out the show with a quick World Juniors update for you, because that tournament continues to go on in Minnesota. The recent young picks for the Calgary Flames, Reschny and Zayne Parekh, are having a pretty solid performance so far. You have a pair of goals in their first game against Chechnya and logged a team-high 22-plus minutes of ice time. And then against Latvia, they ended up scoring as well. A 2-1 overtime victory for Team Canada in that matchup. And then you have the Denmark game where Parekh also had a second multi-point effort in that tournament with a goal and an assist as well. So things going pretty okay for the Calgary Flames young players who are available for the World Juniors Championships. There's more games going to be played on New Year's Eve. Switzerland and Slovakia, and then you have Czechia versus Latvia. United States takes on Sweden, and the Canada-Finland game is scheduled for a 5:30 p.m. Time, Pacific time, 6:30 Mountain on NHL Network in the United States and on TSN for those watching in Canada. So congratulations. Zayne and Cole seem to be playing pretty well and kind of shining for Team Canada at World Juniors, and looking forward to seeing how that tournament finishes up. This is the final day of round robin play, if I remember correctly, and then they're going to get more into the quarterfinals as we go to 2026. From everyone over here at Locked On Podcast Network, certainly from me in the new hosting role on Locked On Flames, thank you so much for supporting the channel. We continue to go towards 700 subscribers on YouTube, and of course all the downloads on our podcast feeds. I can't thank you enough. I'm going to be gone until Monday. We'll talk to you again then and see if Calgary has tallied yet another New Year's Eve victory with the arbitrary stat that I shared with you at the very, very beginning of the broadcast at 14-4-2 since the turn of the century. Calgary on New Year's Eve hosting the Flyers on Wednesday. Thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Flames. Make sure you subscribe and follow so you get the latest episodes. And if you ever miss an episode, please know that the Everydayer Club was built for you. Get Locked On Flames ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Please go to lockedonflames.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, we now send you over to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. And on audio, make sure your second listen is NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL. I'm Ryan G. Thanks for having fun with us. We'll talk to you again soon with more Locked On Flames.